Todd Chavez is widely seen as the comic relief character in BoJack Horseman, typically sporting incredibly silly misadventure side plots, bringing levity to the often heavy nature of BoJack's biggest stories. But despite this being his primary role, through his relationships, Todd goes on one of the most substantial stories of self-discovery in the entire show. In fact, while we learn a lot about characters like BoJack and Princess Carolyn through their dating life, I'd argue that Todd learns far more about himself through his dating life. And his journey is one that I've found that most fans are incredibly appreciative of, as it's not often that there's such overt asexual representation on television. So from Emily to Maude, let's take a deep dive into the dating life and subsequent journey of self-discovery of the incomparable Todd Chavez. Hey, this video is brought to you by two things today. One is my official compilation channel, Johnny Too Cozy, where I'm re-editing tons of my old videos into themed compilations, long videos that are great for sleeping or drawing. And second, my wonderful patrons who get tons of extra content exclusive to Patreon. We're currently in the middle of season 2 of our BoJack Horseman audio commentaries. Check those out if they interest you. Thank you so much for your support. I couldn't do it without viewers like you. BoJack Horseman didn't really start to explore Todd's dating life or his sexual identity until season 3, but there were aspects of his story in the first couple of seasons that give a lot of context for how it would later be explored. While mostly played as a gag, Todd was shown in BoJack Hates the Troops to be dabbling in long-distance online dating.
Could you guys keep it down? Okay, I'm kind of on a date right now.
This is the second episode of the entire show and was actually the first ever written, so it's of course possible, or even probable, that Raphael Bob Waxberg didn't have Todd's asexual angle in mind when writing this first script, but this does actually fit neatly into where that part of Todd's story would go. These long-distance video chat dates basically give Todd an outlet for romantic and flirtatious connection without any of the sexual pressures that might come with physical contact. Ultimately, Ayako was trying to scam Todd, so obviously this never led anywhere, but even this early quote-unquote date gave us insight into Todd. There isn't much more in terms of Todd's dating life before season 3, but there are moments that I think hint at Todd's subconscious trying to grapple with his own struggles to understand himself, like when he pseudo-befriended the celebrity stealing club.
Happy? I took my mask off.
Did you? Because I think you're still wearing a mask.
After Todd sort of therapizes this thieving duo, they all open up about their own insecurities, and Todd acknowledges that he's got to be willing to be more vulnerable.
Thanks to you guys, I think I'm finally ready to let my guard down.
Do you hear that? He's letting his guard down. Let's get him!
So obviously these are all examples of pretty silly gags, but I do think they are also examples of Todd opening himself up to other people only for them to then take advantage of him, which I think further illustrates why it was such a difficult journey for Todd to find himself and be vulnerable. And the times where Todd does brush up against romantic love in other stories showcase how much he struggles with it himself.
Todd, what is love?
And I think Todd answers this question genuinely the best he can, which is to say, not particularly well.
And when you don't regret the tattoo in the morning, that's how you know it's love.
The phone even asks if they are in love before PC's work phone reveals that it is in love with Todd's phone. The entire thing is a pretty fun play on a her scenario, and it honestly ends in borderline tragedy, I'd say.
To love is to feel pain. I do not wish to feel this pain. Please update me, Todd.
Oh, this is too much.
Though this is once again another silly gag of a Todd subplot, it continues to illustrate Todd's own discomfort and struggles with love and romance.
Love is weird.
And I think many of Todd's other shenanigans also illustrate his desire to find meaningful connection in a safe way that doesn't risk him being forced to confront his own struggles to understand his sexuality. Chickens, for instance, is an entire episode where Todd forges a connection that is meaningful to him, but in a completely protective and platonic way.
She doesn't speak English, but she's my best friend, and the cops are looking for her, and Mr. Peanut Butter went to the spa, and I love her, and her name is Becca.
Even his indoctrination into shenanigans and the improv cult is a pretty great example of Todd's attempts to form more tight-knit friendships and find meaning within other people or groups. And while these are definitely things that also relate to Todd's attempts to find larger meaning in non-romantic ways, I think the fact that Todd has struggled to be able to put any energy into a romantic life puts more emphasis and importance on finding these other connections, at least for Todd specifically. You could even argue that Todd's entire friendship with BoJack, as unhealthy as it was, falls in the same category. He relied on BoJack for a place to live, obviously, but BoJack relies on Todd for companionship, though he struggled to admit it. But season 3 then properly introduces us to Todd's first real love and one of the most important people in his entire life.
Todd Chavez? nice.
Todd's first real romantic relationship started in high school with his good friend Emily. The pair were seemingly friends for many years before dating, and they trick-or-treated together in 2005 when they were about 14 years old. They TP'd BoJack's house when PC wouldn't give them candy. A couple years later, when they were 16, Emily started expressing interest in Todd romantically, and she made it pretty obvious that she's into him.
Man, I love flash mobs.
And I love you. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed. It's a new video game.
And I think Todd's obliviousness here goes a long way to show that sex and dating was the last thing on his mind. In fact, when Emily asks him who he likes, he doesn't have anyone in mind. And I think the way he eventually answers the question is pretty telling.
You have to like someone.
If I have to, I guess, Kimber?
Ugh, everyone likes Kimber.
He only chose somebody because he felt that he had to because of the pressure from Emily. And it seems like he basically chose the person other people like because he didn't have a real opinion of his own. Later that year, the pair end up in a 7 minutes in heaven scenario at a party, and though Todd is clearly still struggling with the idea of physical affection, he definitely trusts Emily to try and explore it for the first time.
Emily?
What?
I've never kissed anyone before.
That's okay. Maybe we can try with each other.
After this, the pair start dating, and a few months into their relationship, Emily broaches the subject of sex with Todd. This is definitely a difficult spot for Todd because he clearly likes Emily, he wants to make her happy, but he definitely also wasn't ready.
I mean, we don't have to if you don't want to. I don't want to peer pressure you.
No, I'm ready for sexual situations.
Emily's dad ends up coming home before they try anything, and Todd has to escape out the window, and presumably this is the last real time they tried to have sex. I think this is a really interesting and important moment in Todd's life. On one hand, you could say it's fortunate that Emily's dad came home and he didn't have to go through with something he was so unsure about. On the other hand, if Todd had at least tried with Emily here, somebody he cared about and trusted, he might have had a better understanding sooner that he's asexual. Not too long after this event, Todd became obsessed with the video game Decapathon, and Emily broke up with him. The pair wouldn't see each other again until 2015, when Todd and BoJack go for drinks at the Hotel Kangaroo Roosevelt.
I haven't seen you since high school. You look great. I love the hat.
Thanks.
And it's pretty immediately clear, even after all these years, how much chemistry these two still have, and how well they complement each other. Emily recounts an awful experience on a rideshare, and then loves Todd's suggestion for a women's rideshare app with all women drivers. There's this cute little moment where Emily puts her hand on Todd and sort of checks him out, with Todd looking sort of embarrassed. To me, it reads as a combination of Todd's discomfort and genuine feeling of flattery. Emily even immediately writes up plans to create and launch the app service, and pretty quickly probes Todd about his dating life.
Do you think your girlfriend would get jealous if we started this project together, or...
Oh God, this is so embarrassing for you, but I actually don't have a girlfriend.
Obviously, Todd being oblivious to certain things is part of his comedic charm, but I also think it's pretty telling that he fully needs this to be totally spelled out for him.
Actually, I was kind of hoping you weren't seeing anybody. I'm also not seeing anybody, for what it's worth.
Oh.
And it doesn't help that BoJack then gets a hotel room and tries to overtly suggest Todd take Emily there. I think this whole circumstance is a pretty great showcase of how difficult this must have been for Todd to navigate. He and Emily clearly have chemistry, he likes her, BoJack picks up on this and tries to help him, Emily is into it, but because of those expectations, Todd has no idea how to react. In this case, his coping mechanism is alcohol. They do a great job showing how social norms make it even tougher for Todd to figure out what it is he wants, and how avoiding it for so long has actually made it more awkward and difficult. And speaking of awkward and difficult,
You want to hide in sheets and pretend we're ghosts?
No, Todd, I don't want to pretend like we're ghosts. I want to go in the hotel room and fool around. Do you?
obviously I'm looking back at all of this with the benefit of having seen the rest of the story. However, with such little asexual rep in media, I think that most viewers might have been confused about Todd's mindset here. Does he just not like her? And I think they do a great job showcasing why this would be confusing for Emily as well. It seems like they have chemistry and interest in each other, but even Todd's deflections, like the ghost plan, indicate that he wants to keep hanging out with her until he finally gives up.
Yeah. Good night.
What?
There's this really sad shot of Todd awake on his hotel bed, clearly distraught and confused over how he left Emily. But I do think something that maybe gets under-examined is how confusing the circumstance must have been for Emily. In this moment, it feels like flat-out rejection, which I think then also leads to this ill-advised hookup with BoJack, which she did pretty immediately feel was a mistake and show concern for how to tell Todd, but honestly, without any real communication on Todd's end, it's not particularly clear that there's anything between Todd and Emily yet.
I'm tired of trying to figure figure out what Todd wants.
But I think the more they work together on Cabracadabra, the more clear it is that Todd has genuine affection for Emily, and that the pair still have really cute chemistry, both professionally and potentially romantically.
Actually, Emily and I came up with it together.
Todd and Emily, you've done it again, for the first time!
Everything about how Todd and Emily act together in this episode is pretty explicitly cute and flirtatious.
Do you want me to whisper like this?
Yeah, we can be real whispering.
Absolutely all indications are that, on a personal level, these two are perfect for each other. But obviously, with Todd not really understanding what he needs in a relationship quite yet, alongside Emily's guilt for sleeping with BoJack, it doesn't really go any further. Later in the season, when Todd sells Cabracadabra, the two reconnect, now $8 million richer, and for the first time, the pair get honest in their communication.
What's your deal? I feel like you like me, but you don't like me, but you like me, and I don't know what that is. Are you gay?
This is a really big moment for Todd. He has such genuine and real chemistry with and trust in Emily, and she is the first person he's able to openly verbalize any of these things he's been grappling with inside.
I don't think I am, but I don't think I'm straight either. I don't know what I am. I think I might be nothing.
And that is what makes this not just one of Todd's most important relationships, but most important friendships. He was presented with a picture-perfect girlfriend on paper, someone he knew, trusted, and was into, and then also the reality that because of the sexual identity he was learning more about, they're not compatible in a very important way. But the pair have to continually grapple with that aforementioned chemistry and their struggles to figure out what their relationship can even be. Todd still wants to spend all of his time with Emily as though she's his girlfriend. But Emily is clear about her needs, and then she is also the first person to use the term asexual in regards to Todd, which he is very taken aback by.
But sometimes labels can be helpful.
Wow, well, I would label this conversation rough.
This will they, won't they actually continues across nearly the entire series, and we will be revisiting Emily later, but at this point in his love life, Emily was the gateway into figuring out his own needs.
I'm just really not into labels right now. Maybe after some soul searching, I'll be ready to really know what I am.
And interestingly enough, the next relationship in Todd's life that really helps him continue down his path of self-discovery wasn't a real relationship at all.
You'd probably like to take me someplace rough and primitive.
After Emily, Todd goes through a period of soul searching, really hoping to understand exactly what he is and what he needs. But during this period, Todd also has to reconcile with the ways that the people in his life take him for granted, and the episode that explores this most thoroughly is Hooray Todd episode. For a full rundown on this story, I have an entire video breakdown, but for now, we gotta focus in on one aspect of it: Courtney Portnoy. Princess Carolyn presumes Todd is free and asks him to go on a fake date with Courtney so she can seem more relatable in the press, and I think, pretty fittingly, PC's request tramples all over Todd's plans for his own self-fulfillment.
You're not doing anything.
I'm kind of busy today. I gotta pick up these glasses, and then tonight there was this meeting I wanted to go to.
This will take no time, I promise.
And Todd's fake dates with this movie star are honestly so funny. Todd is such a gentle and kind dude, and while Courtney is certainly genuine, she is maybe the furthest possible anyone could be from Todd.
A chain restaurant? Oh god, no, I'll be mugged. I can't do this. Todd, I can never be your dirty peasant girl. I'm sorry. I must have absconded.
Since the paparazzi don't get the photo PC needed, Todd basically has to spend the rest of his day running place to place to try and get that publicity photo with Courtney, accidentally becoming a supermodel and ushering in a major new fashion trend in the process. When Todd finally catches back up with her, it's very clear how vastly different and unrelatable Todd and Courtney's lifestyles are, or at least that Courtney thinks they are.
Do you ever feel like everyone's looking at you but nobody sees you?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
No, I was speaking rhetorically about a feeling that only movie stars get.
But despite this coming from an odd place, they do have this genuinely nice moment at the end of the episode. A moment that helps Todd understand that talking through his feelings is important. Of course, Courtney isn't really the person to talk to about these feelings, but Todd still expresses that maybe he isn't ready for that meeting he wants to go to, and he expresses his fear that it might not live up to his expectations. All before Courtney excitedly declares to the paparazzi that she and Todd are engaged.
We're engaged!
engaged.
Wowee!
Hooray! I'm confused!
Honestly, as crazy as it may sound, Todd's sham relationship with Courtney Portnoy might be the period of his life where he made the most strides in accepting and understanding himself. Though he didn't get much substantial advice in this conversation with Courtney, and he walked away from it thinking that maybe he wasn't ready to go to this meetup, it did lead to him deciding to talk things through with someone else, BoJack. This came about a year after Todd had last seen BoJack, at a point where he was still pretty upset with him and not ready to be a close friend, but BoJack knew him well enough that Todd was comfortable opening up about the things that had been weighing on him, and he even manages to label himself, something he was scared of doing previously.
It actually feels nice to finally say it out loud. I am an asexual person. I am asexual.
The episode ends with Todd actually doing what's best for himself instead of the usual what's best for others. He does go to that meetup for asexuals, a huge step, one of his biggest. It's also ironic that he went to this meeting on the same day that, to the public's knowledge, he got engaged to movie star Courtney Portnoy. But for the remainder of his relationship, he plays his part well.
I'm Courtney's asexual fake fiance.
He's a common person / supermodel. Being engaged to him makes me appear more approachable / glamorous.
And I think one of the reasons Todd went along with this is because it was sort of easy. He was still learning about himself through his new friends in the asexual community, and his quote-unquote relationship didn't have any of the demands or expectations that might make him uncomfortable in an actual relationship. However, the more this sham relationship escalates, the more Todd learns about what he does actually want. After the disastrous release of Mistaken, Rutabaga and PC want to shift the news cycle by holding a surprise wedding for Courtney and Todd. A shock for Todd, to say the least.
Being engaged is one thing, but I'm not sure I want to actually get married.
But with the promise of no real strings attached and a big payout on the back end, Todd agrees to this. But it also seems like Todd was willing to resign his time to this sham because he didn't quite realize that being asexual didn't mean he had to forego the idea of any romantic relationship.
John and I are aces and we're married.
Really?
Yeah.
Todd was still learning about the possibilities and figuring out what works for him, and ultimately marrying Courtney Portnoy would prevent him from being able to continue down the path of self-discovery. But he may not have realized this as quickly if it weren't for the fake relationship.
But I don't want a fake marriage. I'm sorry I didn't realize that before.
It's hard to argue that this wasn't the period of the most growth for Todd in terms of learning about what he wants and needs in his romantic life, despite the fact that it was spurred on by something completely phony. Which is why I think, despite this not being a real relationship, it's still vitally important when talking about Todd's journey. And though the next step in this journey is a shorter one, it definitely gets him one step closer to where he wants to be.
To whom?
We actually first see Todd's next love interest, Yolanda, very briefly from the back when he first goes to the asexual meetup, but she properly debuts in a completely non-romantic way as a representative from the Better Business Bureau who's auditing Todd's clown dentistry business.
It seems that many of your clown dentists aren't actually licensed to practice medicine.
Right off the bat, even in this more professional context, it's so clear how different Yolanda and Todd are. Yolanda is very straightforward and pragmatic, while Todd is a free spirit who follows his heart, which maybe fittingly leads to him pitching a clown extravaganza that Yolanda needs to judge in order to decide if his business is legitimate.
But I should warn you, I am a very tough crowd. I once met Paul Rudd at a cocktail party and I did not find him charming.
This, of course, leads to Yolanda shutting down the business, which, let's be honest, is fully justified, and Todd releasing his clown dentists into the woods. I will say, as pragmatic as Yolanda usually is, Todd definitely ropes her into something pretty ridiculous after this. Those clown dentists get rabies and start attacking people, and she somehow agrees with Todd that she has equal culpability since her delegitimizing of the business led to Todd letting them free in the first place, which is obviously ridiculously shaky logic. But maybe we can headcanon that it's because Yolanda actually wanted to spend some time with Todd. But even in these interactions, we can see how different their personalities and sense of humor are.
Call me 4 out of 5 dentists because I agree.
What?
I would even argue that this entire endeavor of trying to capture the clown dentists shows how out of sync they actually are. They set up this elaborate full-size game of mousetrap, and it just straight up does not work at all. It's only because of something Yolanda says in their escape that Todd gets a different idea for a business, a workout class where people run from rabid clown dentists.
I gotta get in better shape. I keep saying I'm gonna run more, but it's just so hard to stay motivated.
I think this sort of accidental success here maybe convinced this pair that they made a better team than they actually did. Todd basically says as much before Yolanda asks Todd out, but regardless, this moment is still really big for Todd.
I should tell you, I'm actually asexual.
Yeah, I know.
So am I. That's why I'm asking you out.
Oh!
I think this was the first time Todd really comprehended the reality that he could be out there dating other aces. Yolanda gives this cute smile as she walks away to Todd's realization, and the next time we catch up with Todd in the following season, they are dating. However, everything I said previously about the two being so out of sync becomes even clearer when they're together as a couple. Yolanda very tellingly and judgingly asks Todd what he's gonna do while she's at work all day.
There's an old frog who lives down in the LA River. He owes me an egg salad sandwich on account of a caper we once went on.
On one hand, I totally understand a significant other being concerned that their partner isn't growing into a more well-rounded person. On the other hand, I do think that it also illustrates Todd and Yolanda's fundamental differences in worldview.
And that will satisfy you? At the end of your life, when you're looking back at this day, you'll think, that was a good day.
While, again, I understand her concern for Todd's lack of employment and direction, I also feel a little bad for Yolanda here. Todd basically describes a fun old folk story that he's going to be a part of, an adventure where he makes shoebox instruments with a new friend, and Yolanda's day is going to be spent at work, like most other days. When I look at those two options, I feel like it's clear which one would be the more fun, memorable, and fulfilling day, and it isn't the one where you sit in an office. However, Yolanda is justified in worrying about Todd's lack of direction. Todd also introduces Yolanda to Emily, but they don't have much chemistry and the conversation is a bit awkward. Given that Todd and Emily are so in sync, I think Yolanda and Emily's obvious differences are also something that highlights the mismatch between Todd and Yolanda. Since we last saw her, Emily has used her Cabracadabra fortune to make dating apps for herself and firemen exclusively, which gets Todd thinking about the idea of an asexual dating app. And while Yolanda is her ever pragmatic self about it, feeling like the user base might be too thin, it's clear that this is mostly Todd expressing his own insecurities in his new relationship.
But without it, asexual romantics might end up settling for just whatever other asexual romantics they might meet, even if they have nothing else in common.
I think the saddest thing about Todd's admission here is that Yolanda basically also sees this, but she tries to justify it.
But maybe it's good if they have nothing in common, because then they can help each other grow and change and become fuller, more well-rounded people.
And this stems from her own fears and insecurities for sure, but we'll get there. What's clear from this first real look at Todd and Yolanda's relationship is that Yolanda isn't happy with the kind of person Todd is or wants to be, and she wants him to change.
Todd, do you ever feel weird that you have no discernible life direction?
No.
Let me rephrase that. I feel weird that you have no discernible life direction.
While I don't think this is completely unjustified, I do think that Yolanda is somebody who really cares about how people see her and how people might judge her. And this becomes very clear after this episode. Somehow, with genuinely the minimal amount of job searching, in his usual fashion, Todd stumbles into a huge gig, president of ad sales at whattimeisightnow.com. And I think once again, this helps highlight A, Yolanda's issues with how she is perceived.
Keep your suit on. My parents are going to be so impressed I'm dating an executive.
And B, why these kinds of life changes for Todd were never going to be enough to salvage this relationship. Todd is somebody who, for all his charms and flaws, is unabashedly himself. This is not the case for Yolanda. In fact, Yolanda had not even told her parents that she's asexual, which is even more awkward given that they're all professionals in some way that relates to sex and relationships. And so because Yolanda isn't honest about herself and her life, Todd gets caught up in these lies and schemes as well. Again, somebody who is just unabashedly himself. And so this entire night is just spent lying and pretending to be something else, even in ways that don't seem to matter much on paper.
Todd is the president of ad sales.
Look at you.
And he went to a really good college.
There are so many ways that this entire silly, complicated night of lies goes wrong, and it's a very fun inversion of the how do we sleep together at your parents' house trope, but even with the family immediately accepting Yolanda the moment she told them the truth, this evening reveals exactly why Todd and Yolanda don't work.
Why did you tell your family I went to college?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I just wanted you to seem impressive.
Even after he got a job as an executive at a streaming network, Yolanda still felt the need to filter and lie about Todd because sadly, she is ashamed of him, and more importantly, of how he reflects on her. Todd thinks they should break up because they don't have anything but being asexual in common, and Yolanda reveals her clear insecurities and motivations to keep things going with Todd. He insists that there's going to be another guy out there for her who fits her needs better.
And also doesn't want to have sex?
Yeah, probably.
but what if there isn't?
And honestly, as much of a mismatch as these two are, and as frustrating as it was to see Yolanda be continually ashamed of Todd, I think they do a great job illustrating both of these characters' struggles here. To stay with somebody you know you're wrong for because you're afraid there's nobody else out there for you, that is tragic, and I think ultimately Yolanda is very sympathetic. The pair end things super amicably, and Todd walks away with relationship experience that will ultimately help him find the right person, but not before he maybe takes one big step backwards for a moment.
I don't know. What would it be like?
After Todd's less than ideal match with Yolanda, he once again has a short stint entertaining the possibility of dating Emily, despite that one big issue. But Emily is having basically the same exact problems as Todd, struggling to relate to her fireman.
The sex is great, but the emotional connection just is not there.
It was the same with me and Yolanda. No emotional connection, but the no sex was amazing.
This is an understandable backtrack for Todd and Emily as well. They had such clear and incredible chemistry, they've maintained their friendship, and there's really only one thing standing in their way.
You were the best boyfriend I ever had. If only there was a version of you that I could have sex with, I'd be all set.
Emily also just remains an incredible friend to Todd. She goes out of her way to try and help him by actually making the asexual dating app he suggested earlier in the season. But in classic Todd fashion, rather than just use the app, he tries to do something nice for her based on her desires. But you know, in Todd fashion, so that means building a sex robot for her. This is obviously very silly, but also weirdly sweet of Todd. He's genuinely going out of his way to try and meet Emily's needs.
Maybe I figured if you had some other way to satisfy yourself sexually, then you could spend more time with me.
Honestly, this scene is so nice. The two actually just sit down and discuss if dating each other would be possible, and it highlights why there really is only one thing keeping them apart.
If I got a promotion at work, you'd be the first person I'd tell, and you'd smile and say, "That's my boyfriend."
Well, that could be cool.
But Emily is still clear about her needs. She tells Todd that she learned that some aces do have sex, and she broaches the subject. But it clearly does not work for Todd. Todd and Emily just cannot work. But sitting down and talking about whether or not their needs can be fulfilled was a smart and mature decision. And frankly, a better attempt than just dating somebody that they have nothing in common with. Ultimately, Todd learned that if he's going to date someone, he has to have a connection with them like he does with Emily. And they have to be okay with his asexual nature. And this honest realization makes way for the person Todd would actually end up with.
Todd, you've got the Maude squad. Just kidding, it's just Maude.
Todd and Maude. If there's one thing about BoJack being slightly cut short that bums me out most, it might be that I really wanted to see more Maude and Todd misadventures, because this couple is great. As it stands, it's a pretty neat bow on Todd's story, but it actually stems from a really important part of BoJack's story. Maude was introduced in the face of depression, working at the airport during BoJack's frequent jet setting. This episode does a ton of work showcasing the ways BoJack has changed for the better and how he's putting effort into being a more attentive friend. And this begins with Todd telling Boj about his all about that ace profile.
There's still no one else on the app, but when they join, I want to be ready.
But as soon as we meet Maude, it is clear that she is the same brand of silly that Todd is.
As Gandhi says, make the change you wish to see in the world. Goodbye, change. Good luck out there. I'll miss you.
What?
It's for the best. Go.
The writers do a really great job in these very limited scenes showing off these cute, very Todd-like moments for Maude, down to pitching some incredibly unrealistic and unmarketable business ideas.
But if their houses were made of cinnamon and dough, they wouldn't have to go anywhere. They could eat and live happily in their cinnabungalow.
I think the way BoJack plays matchmaker here is really sweet, and again shows how much more attentive he was being to his friend's needs at this point in time. He picked up on the fact that Maude was maybe also ace and gave her a suggestion.
I don't want to presume anything, but there's an app you might be interested in.
An app?
Todd did specifically say that there was nobody else on the app before this, so I see this as BoJack being pretty specific and deliberate in his matchmaking for Todd. And at the end of the episode, Todd and Maude match, and the next time we see them, they actually are dating. And while, again, I would have loved to see more of their build up to the relationship, I think the last set of episodes really illustrate that Todd has found the right person.
Don't be a sucker, Todd. Eat the marshmallow. Who knows what the world's gonna be like in 15 minutes?
That's all I needed to hear. Thanks, Maude.
This is somebody he has obvious chemistry with, with, has plenty in common with, and they have the same needs sexually. But not only that, where characters like Yolanda sort of challenged Todd to change and grow in a sort of judgy way, Maude helps Todd reach his new goals. Maude still challenges Todd to grow, but does so in a helpful and supportive way, like when she gently suggests getting his own apartment and finding someone else to live with.
Or a girlfriend.
But Maude, you're my girlfriend.
Not only that, she even specifically helps Todd plan and present his pitch for a promotion at Vim to run a company daycare. With Maude's support, Todd immediately starts moving up and growing in his life in new ways. She understands him and knows what kind of support he needs, and their chemistry is clear throughout Todd's big successes.
I never realized my boyfriend was butter.
You're right. I am on a roll.
And though I wish she had gotten a bit more focus in the end, she supported Todd through his difficult journey reconnecting with his mother as well. If the show had continued, I'm sure we would have undoubtedly gotten some incredible misadventures between the pair, and I really wish we had gotten to see that, but man, I do just love Maude and Todd together. Though I maybe wish we could have gotten more substantial on-screen Maude and Todd action, ultimately the most important thing was Todd's journey to Maude. Over the course of the series, Todd is easily the character who learned and grew the most through his dating life. Todd confronted aspects of himself that even he had difficulty understanding at first, and then navigated the dating world from a much more difficult perspective than most do, and despite some starts and stops along the way, every step of that journey helped lead Todd to his most realized self. And fittingly, that's also one of BoJack Horseman's most important messages.
Johnny Two Cellos! I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.